I flew over a glacier in Greenland. Just above the Arctic Circle, the town of Ilulissat, Greenland, is home to some breathtaking scenery. It's located right on the coast of Disco Bay, just north of the Ilulissat Ice Fjord. The Ice Fjord is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, running about 40 kilometers east to the Lycoming Glacier. That glacier is one of the fastest moving in the world, with billions of tons of icebergs calving off of it every year from the Greenland ice sheet. All of this makes for some spectacular sights around Ilulissat, and it is the most popular tourist destination in Greenland. I was there back in September with a couple friends, and we had a great few days enjoying said scenery and views of the ice. However, while researching for our trip, we discovered a small aerial sightseeing company called AirZafari Greenland that offered tours from Ilulissat. They have a couple of different pre-planned routes, with flight times ranging from 25 minutes to 2.5 hours, and pricing to reflect that too. Given Greenland's remoteness and just how rare it would be to see some of this without an airplane, we all agreed this was something we had to do while we were here. Now, we had been in touch with AirZafari since before we left Canada, but it being VFR flying above the Arctic Circle, which is kind of wild to think about, we decided we would talk to them in person to figure out the best route once we arrived on our Dash 8 flight from Nuuk. That video also shows a bit more of Ilulissat itself, and getting here in the first place, so I'd recommend watching that as well if you haven't already. After settling in, we stopped at their office downtown to chat with the team there, including our pilot for the day, to review our options. The weather the next day was supposed to be extra windy and turbulent, so we agreed on the UNESCO Ice Fjord and Blue Lakes flight for later that afternoon. This would be an hour-long trip heading northeast first over the mountains, and then over part of the ice sheet until reaching the glacier itself, flying westbound along the fjord, and then over the icebergs before returning back to the airport. We had about 2 hours before the flight, so we spent a bit of time downtown, and then got a taxi to the terminal. AirZafari themselves are a family-owned company, founded in 2010, and they fly 3 aircraft which are based in Ilulissat as well as Kangerlussuaq. AirZafari's office is located in the terminal building, just next to the normal passenger entrance. They had this little waiting area here, where we signed the usual waivers and the manifest, got a safety briefing, and an overview of our route. I should also mention, AirZafari only operates in the summer season, so effectively the start of May to the end of September. After that was done, we headed outside to walk across the ramp to our plane for today. We'd be flying on board a Partenavia P-68, registered as Oscar Yankee, Oscar Charlie Mike. AirZafari has 3 of these. They're an Italian-built twin-piston aircraft with 6 seats, and this one was built in 1979. Just over 400 of these P-68s were built, and are still in production today, but produced by Vulcanair instead. They're advertised as the most cost-effective twin-engine airplane for observation roles. This one has been on the Danish register since 2001 with various private owners, and has flown with AirZafari since 2011. Inside, there are 3 rows of seats, with 2 in the back, 2 in the middle, and 1 other passenger seat up front next to the pilot. There's also a pair of David Clarks for every passenger too. My seat would be in the middle row of this P-68 on the right-hand side. Knowing me, my preference was to sit up front, but because of the unique shape of these planes, the front seat is quite small, and this middle row actually has the most headroom, which I certainly appreciated. One other part I'd like to point out is that the middle rows have these bubble windows for an even better outside view. Now, in all honesty, the scenery from this point on really does speak for itself, so I'm going to stay quiet for most of this, but I will chime in again at certain points. Here's the takeoff out of Ilulissat off of runway 06. first stop on our flight was the Northern Glacier, about 35 kilometers northeast of the town of Ilulissat. This one no longer produces icebergs, at least not to the scale of those coming off the main glacier. Both sides of the plane got a good look out their respective windows before we continued over the ice sheet. As we pass over this part, I do just want to show you how good these bubble windows are, with a far better field of view. For photography purposes, these windows were spotless, although I do recommend bringing black gloves to cut down on any reflections. The seats are pretty comfortable for a piston twin, at least in this row. There are also air vents for each seat. Up front is interesting to see too. It looks like a pretty standard piston twin, but with some subtle differences from a somewhat uncommon Italian manufacturer. But anyway, back to some views of the ice as we make our way towards the bigger and very much still moving glacier. The Jakobshavn Glacier is said to be the most productive glacier in the entire northern hemisphere, with 10% of all of Greenland's icebergs coming from it. At one point in the 2010s, the glacier flowed an average of 40 meters a day. The actual glacier front has retreated significantly over the last 150 years, and this is why the whole ice fjord became a World Heritage Site, not only for the impressive sights, but also the insights it provides for the scientific community on climate change. And yes, it was actually really difficult to figure out where to look at this point, so I hope the sheer scale of all of this comes across. What's also so unreal about this perspective is that each of those cracks in the ice, called crevasses, could be as deep as 20 to 100 meters. This next part would take us along the fjord, down to as low as 400 feet. That should give you a sense of just how massive some of these icebergs are. About halfway down the fjord, we climb back up a bit for a better view of the icebergs at the very end. Just before the fjord opens out into Disco Bay, there's a shallower part of the seabed that most of these large icebergs are actually stuck on, hence why they're all clumped together in this one spot. It can sometimes take years for the large ones to either melt enough to break apart, or be broken apart by the force of the glacier and other icebergs up the fjord. After those views of the icebergs, we were already nicely lined up for a straight-in approach over the town to runway 06 again. That gave us another great view of the town, and the new Ilulissat airport, with the much larger and, most importantly, jet-capable runway just north of the existing one. So that was a sightseeing flight to end all sightseeing flights. What an absolute treat that was to see more of this beautiful place in the best possible way. I cannot recommend this enough. If you're in Ilulissat, it is well worth the price, especially if you find a couple other people to share it with, which is exactly what we did. The front seat passenger was another tourist who flew to Greenland on the United flight, and AirZafari paired them up with us since we were both in touch with them ahead of time. That was in addition to a new friend we made from Cranbrook, British Columbia of all places, who just happened to be going to Greenland at the exact same time we were. With all the seats occupied, it worked out to be a reasonable price, especially for what we got to see. After this, it's gonna be difficult to go back to normal VFR flying at home. Thank you so much for watching some VFR flying in Greenland, and I will see you next time.